The Monday Mornings podcast is presented by Southern Michigan Bank and Trust, continuous banking since 1872. Switch today and visit smb-t.com. Welcome inside the Monday Mornings podcast presented by Southern Michigan Bank and Trust. Skip the line and take control of your banking with our personal teller machines, PTMs, available Monday through Friday, 9 to 7, and Saturdays, 9 to 12. Easily make withdrawals, deposits, loan payments, and more, all at your convenience, thanks to SMBT. And we've got a special one today, don't we?
Oh my gosh. Mind blown in even just investigating leading up to this conversation.
Yeah.
We know what an amazing place this is where we live and the amazing people that come out of it. But wow, she is something else, a force to be reckoned with. Katherine Schweit is now an author. She's working on her third book, the Red Book, as she called it, all about mass shootings, gun violence in America via her experience in the FBI. And learning how she got to the FBI is fascinating.
Oh, it's crazy. I can't wait to share this story with all of you. And she's so smart. And it's not just in one area. You know, she's also an attorney, a former investigative journalist, of course, an author, and FBI special agent who was one of the leaders in mass killings in our country. So
she's also an executive producer of a movie.
Right.
And she was fresh off of the Wolf Blitzer panel last week, and her next stop was Andy and Jennifer on the Monday Mornings podcast.
We're very excited. It's time now. Let's welcome in Kate Schweit. Welcome inside the Monday Mornings podcast. We are excited. Our guest today is Katherine Schweit, who is an author, attorney, former Chicago prosecutor, and career FBI special agent who helped jail bank robbers, kidnappers, domestic terrorists, all while working daily with local police investigating and responding to mass casualty and active shooter incidents. That's just a couple of the things you do. Welcome.
Thank you. It's just kind of, what I do.
Yeah.
I'd like to reintroduce her as born and bred local badass.
That is exactly right. Exactly right. So
I grew up in Jackson.
That's awesome.
I love Jackson. So every time, you have to know, I came in the night before. So I ate Hinckley Donuts for breakfast.
We were talking about that.
You got to do it.
That's right.
I just want to say, I'm really thankful for the health of the baker.
Yes.
Yes.
Right? And how he was able to muster it and bring it.
Just in time.
Before I came back to town.
Where do you currently spend your time?
So I live in Northern Virginia.
Okay.
Which is outside of Washington, D.C. And basically 10 minutes from Dulles Airport, so I can fly anywhere fast.
So how do you go from Jackson, Michigan to
FBI.
just outside of D.C.
and
FBI and all the amazing things you've done?
Oh, Jackson. I actually worked. I was born in Detroit. My dad got transferred here. We worked here, lived in a house on Beverly Park.
Oh, nice.
A nice house where we could see the Cascades and the fireworks every 4th of July, which is my favorite holiday. And we would, and so I went to school here. I went to Michigan State. Go Green. Sorry for all you Michigan people. I mean, you're okay, but because we need competition. But and so I went to Michigan State, and I was working at the Jackson Citizen Patriot, the newspaper here, when I was a kid and younger, and then I eventually worked my way into a job in the Chicago newspaper business, and I worked there. Then I pretty much found that most of the people who were lying to me while I was trying to be a reporter were lawyers. So. So no offense, because now I am a lawyer because I went to law school, so I would be able to be a better reporter. And then I got offered a job that I just really couldn't refuse because it was better pay. So
you were solving cases as a investigative reporter, and
it's all the same thing.
Yeah.
I'm just doing the same thing. First, I was doing it as a reporter, then I became a prosecutor and did it, and then I joined the FBI and did it. And now I'm doing it as a consultant.
So you mentioned join the FBI. Did you find the FBI or did they find you?
Well, they found me in this way. They get a huge number of applications. It's like ridiculous. Like the year that I got into the FBI Academy, there were like 30,000 applications that year.
That's amazing.
That were qualifying applicants. So that was really cool to find out after the fact, because otherwise I would never even gone. But actually, I had a cousin who was in the FBI who was older than I am.
Okay.
And he kind of badgered me into just applying. I wasn't really interested in the job. Because I was a prosecutor. Like, nobody goes from the prosecutor's office to the FBI office or an investigator office, but apparently some of us do.
Well, let me ask you, what's it like when you are finally an FBI agent? That's got to feel ridiculous because you grow up watching on TV. That's where you see FBI. I mean, and now you have your own jacket with FBI on it. What's that like?
I actually do have one of those blue jackets
Yeah.
with the yellow letters.
Right.
on
I'm
it.
going to need a picture of that.
They do not just give those out.
They actually do not just give those out. It's the same one that I had when I was at the FBI Academy because they only give you one.
Wow.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, they're like, if you lose this, we're not replacing it.
So we're sitting across from you, and you are so accomplished and distinguished in your careers, but
just
it's
a
not.
job. It's just one job after another.
But it impacts a lot of people.
Well, it does, and I was just going to say it's not necessarily a pretty job. I mean,
No, there's definitely, yes, there are definitely nights that are not pretty.
well, actually, let's jump into that then, because one of the biggest things I wanted to ask you is you have a passion for eliminating gun violence. You have been a part of helping to secure and solve mass tragedies across our great country here. How do you compartmentalize that at the end of the day and go home and actually sleep and eat and enjoy your life?
I think anybody who works in emergency services, has the answer to that question because they all do it every day. Or people who, work in emergency rooms in the medical world, and you just think, oh, I couldn't do that. It's such tragedy to see that. I think about that when I think about people who work in, cemeteries and, but really in my case, I went to Chicago for a journalism job, ended up in the prosecutor's office, ended up from there into the FBI. And when I started in the FBI, I had, as a prosecutor, been working, I was in charge of the Cook County felony drug cases, the appeals. And so I didn't want to do drug work. And I got assigned, actually, to national security work. So that's all, spies and, counterintelligence and stuff. It's all like nobody's, you don't think of it as, nobody's dying, but there actually are people. But, it's not the same as like what police officers deal with every day. And I used to always think about that. It's like that's how part of the way I compartmentalize it is I'm not doing what other people are doing. So like when 9/11 happened, as it turned out, I was the supervisor for the state of Wisconsin's terrorism, response for the FBI.
Wow.
It's a job. And so...
Well, I know a little bit about this. It's not just a job. Talk about some of the things that you guys were doing, if you can, on the day of 9/11.
Oh, so much. But let me just say this about what you were asking about compartmentalizing. On 9/11, I was a single mom with 2 kids.
Oh, wow.
And I lived 60 miles away from the office I was working in. So we went automatically to 12-hour shifts because that's what we did.
Yeah.
And then as the supervisor, I had to be there to brief people in, and to listen and to brief people out. So it was kind of 14 hours a day.
Yes.
I had to be in Wisconsin, and then I had a 2-hour drive. Mm-hmm. So it really, I think about it now, and I think, that's crazy. Why did you do that? How effective were you actually being? But I will say that, the night of 9/11, I finally made it home. It was 2 a.m. And the day had been very long and intense because the Attorney General actually landed in Wisconsin, in Milwaukee, Mitchell Field.
Oh, wow.
At the time that the second plane was hitting, his plane was taxiing onto our runway. And all I could think of was get him out of town.
Yeah.
Please don't leave. We don't even have a command post. We didn't even have a command post to work out of because it was one of the smaller offices. And they had grounded all the planes. So they had to reload his plane with gas and bring in fighter jets to have them escort him into Washington to get the Attorney General back to Washington. And it had been a very crazy day. The head of the person who owned the ATF agents in town called me right away and said, I have this many people. They're all yours.
Oh.
Should I send them to your office, or do you want me to have them work here? I mean, we were you're making stuff up.
Yeah.
Right? We didn't know. And we didn't know if there were going to be bombings in our locations and stuff.
Yeah.
So by the time I made it home, I know that this is going to age me, but we were communicating because of national security matters. There's not we had pagers.
Yeah.
Right? We had pagers. And the moment I got home, I went to take my gun belt off and my badge, and my pager was on my gun and on my belt and all this other stuff, my handcuffs and stuff. And And I went to take my belt off, and everything flew across the room, and my pager plopped into the toilet.
Oh, stop.
Well, you had to go in and get it.
I did. It was a pager. I had to. And then I had to find a phone, my hardline phone, and call with calling card and call the office and say, who issues pagers? And they're like, oh, Dan does, the finance manager. I'm like, well, call him and get him out of bed because I'm coming back to the office in 4 hours and I need a new pager.
Oh, stop.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's just like the craziness of what happens, the craziness of what happens.
So you just do it.
You just do it. And I think that's it about everything, right? You just figure out a way to do it. Because the other thing that I learned, my cousin, when he was trying to talk me into coming to the FBI, he said, there's two things about working for the federal government that are different than your job in the state. One is when the shit hits the fan, the federal government will not tell you there isn't budget money for that.
Oh.
They'll just find a way to pay for it.
Okay.
And the other thing you should know is they'll never send you home. If you don't go home,
They'll
never
never
send
say
you
it's
home.
time for you to go
Sure.
home.
So you have to work as an agent today. It's no different today. You have to work a minimum of 50 hours a week to get your paycheck,
Okay.
not including any commuting time. And so, for people
Which is a lot of commuting time, I assume.
New York, LA, our largest offices, thousands of agents and personnel. There's like 38,000 people in the FBI, and they work a lot of hours, and they work long. So 9/11 was just, I said to my kids, like when I'd see them, right? My neighbors were always I'd call, Jody, can you just go find my kids? I think they're still at school. Really great mom. And they, they were feeding them and picking them up and dropping them here and trading them off. The neighbors were, because you get assigned to wherever you get assigned.
Yeah.
And I was living in Illinois in a place I'd never been to before.
Oh, my God.
And this job that I was in, I'd been in for 1 week on 9/11, not 1 week. So just making it up. And so it was just, it was pretty crazy. But you know what? I said to my kids, I had a meeting today with 2 of my agents who I had to send to another state for 4 months.
Yeah.
So I'm home every day. The soldiers are not home. They're deployed for a year. So that's how my perspective is always, there's always people who are doing more for the cause.
Well, in a world with that's so heavy with so much ugliness, and you see a lot more of it than we can even imagine, though, to be able to move somewhere and have a village come around you and your kids,
Yeah, they were great.
it has to give you hope in mankind.
I think it does, right? I mean, I think that's true. The other thing is, you knock on a lot of doors. When I worked in Wisconsin, you're knocking on people's doors. Before I moved to Virginia and in Illinois, I was working, and, you're knocking on people's doors. And I talked in this one guy's door, and I'm working a espionage case that involves somebody from a foreign country. I knock on the door, and he's
Our
living.
jobs are so boring.
Yes.
No, it's just a job.
But
It's just a.
it's fun to hear about.
and so I'm working on this case, and there's a neighbor who doesn't know any better, and it's not like I can go in and say, hey, let me just tell you this classified top secret information, about this person. So I can't do that. So I just go in and I said to him, sir, I knock on his condo door and say, I'm from the FBI. I'm Katherine Schweit from the FBI. Here's my credentials. I have a situation that I'm working on. It's an investigation, and truthfully, it's classified, and I really can't tell you anything about it. But I'm knocking on your door because I'm wondering if you can do this one thing for me. If you see this car across the street in that driveway anytime in the next year,
Yeah.
can you just call me? And that's all I can. That's all I can ask of you.
Yep.
And I said I could give you, $20 a week or $50 a week or something. He's like, I'm an American. That's my job.
Oh, God
Yeah,
bless.
that's cool.
That's amazing.
Let me ask you, our country and the media is, I don't know if obsessed is the right word, but when there is a mass killing,
Yeah.
Americans are drawn to it. It's interesting what tragedies the news decides to pick up and cover and spend
And
weeks
how.
at. And you've been at so many of these sites.
Yeah.
Let's take a site. You give me one. Tell me what it's like when the FBI shows up or when you get there. How chaotic is the situation?
Okay, well, it's pretty crazy is the short answer. But the longer answer is, well, that's true. I've been at a lot of the scenes afterwards, during, afterwards, and then for research for my books, I've researched a lot of those even I teach a law class in DePaul and Chicago, and the same thing. You need to have all that background. So just as an example, when there was a shooting at the Holocaust Museum in downtown Washington, I was working in our Washington field office, so I responded to that with everybody else. And unfortunately, my job at the time was to manage the FBI's media response and coordinate with everybody else. So while some of my team were on the search team going into the 3 days it took them, to do this and that, and the 5 days it took them to do this and that. And we send a huge amount of people to the scenes of these. The FBI does, as do many other law enforcement agencies. And I think in the case of the Holocaust Museum shooting, there was a person killed there who was a federal employee. It's a federal facility, a federal site. The person who was employed, I believe, was a federal employee, but he's a contractor, security. You know what? I'm going to withdraw that because I'm not even 100% sure if he was. But it was a federal investigation because it was because it was a hate crime.
Yep. That's
why it was our investigation. But it isn't always our investigation, and it doesn't really matter, like, in terms of who shows up. Like, the shooting that occurs of the CEO being shot in New York City in December, that CEO, private company, big city, huge law enforcement agency, largest, best in the country, NYPD. And so it's their case. We still go in and help.
Yeah.
We help if we can. What we do is we fill in, and a lot of times there may be a potential for a federal charge. If they want it, we do it. If they don't, murder is a local crime, state crime. And so it's not so much what the charges are and what prison somebody goes into, but more like what do we bring to the scene. And those scenes are crazy, and they are just like, what do we do this 5 minutes? What do we do this 5 minutes? And actually, when I first got involved after the Sandy Hook shooting, the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting, that's really what my first charge was, when I was working on a White House team was, what is the law enforcement's responsibility? And so we kind of developed and kind of retrained, we hope, helped to elevate law enforcement across the country to say, these are your first priorities. These are the first things to worry about. Because, for example, in the, when we responded to the Aurora Theater shooting, that was Colorado? Colorado, the Aurora, Colorado Theater shooting. When we responded to the Aurora, Colorado Theater shooting, the shooter had put bombs, set up a bunch of bombs, homemade bombs, IEDs, in his improvised explosive devices, IEDs, in his apartment building. He intended to blow up his entire building first so that all of law enforcement would be there and distracted. That was his intent. But it didn't work because the building didn't blow up. But those are the kind of things that we need every law enforcement officer to know, that when you go to find the subject's car, it's very possible there'll be bombs in it. So you have to be careful about that. So that's the kind of what I mean about elevating. We want all law enforcement in any town, big or small, to know that when you respond, these are the protocols that you need to be careful about.
You were a big part of the movie Coming Storm.
I did. I was the executive producer of it, yeah.
So highly recommend to our viewers. I was able to find it online, and it was one of those compelling, 30, 45 minutes that you're just riveted. And what you just talked about was something that I never even considered in these things. How do you all work together? And are you ever met with, what are you doing here, FBI?
Yeah, like you see on TV.
This is our thing.
Yeah, television is, why are you here?
Right.
Here's what real life is like. It's the middle of the night, practically, pitch black outside. I'm in Wisconsin. I drive 2 counties over because they have something and they don't know what to do about it. And I arrive in the scene of this huge parking lot, and I drive up to where all the cars are in the center of this empty parking lot. Clearly, that's where all the cops are. I pull up there in my car. I hop out of my car. I walk across the parking lot. It is just like a movie, right? And I walk across the parking lot, and a group of people start coming towards me, led by a man who is at least a foot taller than me. And he sticks his hand out and he says, "I'm Chief so-and-so. My men are yours. What would you like us to do?"
Oh, that's amazing.
That is how cooperation. That's how police cooperate with law enforcement and federal law enforcement, and that's how the FBI cooperates.
Going back to some of the scenes, one thing I was thinking about when we were talking is you have chaos in those communities on Twitter, on social media. When you're talking about students are involved, you have families who want to rush to the scene. How big of a factor or issue is that at a lot of these mass killing sites?
I think it's big. It's a big problem that the public obviously doesn't absorb the challenges that law enforcement has. I'll give you an example. There were lots of examples. Sorry. Michigan State University, 4 people killed.
Right.
The shooting there, when that shooting occurred in Michigan State, the chief, who's the chief now, we met with him. I went up there because they called. We had conversations, and anytime somebody calls, I go. Like Oakland County prosecutor called me after that and said, "Can we talk?" And so Karen McDonald. So we talked before they charged the boy, but also the parents. And when we talked at Michigan State, one of the problems that we saw, the chief is aware of. One of the problems that is that chaos that comes from they have an open radio channel. People are listening to the police radio channel and then guessing what's going on because they can't see it. They don't know what's going on. And they're pushing out onto social media. I heard there's 12 people killed. I heard there's 20 people killed.
There's multiple shooters.
That is so not helpful. I can tell you that when the Navy Yard shooting happened in Washington, D.C., we had our SWAT team there, as did many other people who congealed onto the scene, law enforcement. They're trying to clear a 300,000 square foot building. Jeez. Right? There's 117 officers inside the building, and our SWAT team is outside the building, and we're getting calls that there's another incident at the Air Force Base, and which was a false call. And it was people saying, "I heard," and then they pass it along on social media. I heard. There's nothing more important. So don't pass on any rumors. Just don't. Go to one source and don't pass on rumors, no matter how confident you are. Because here's what I hear all the time. I hear this so much, I would stop the entire show and just say this for the whole show. Stop saying, "I know a guy in law enforcement and he knows, and I know it's true because I talked to him." It's like, that's great. He might know. Your cousin's uncle's nephew, who used to be a sheriff, might know because he talked to 3 other people that he might know some of the facts, but he doesn't know the facts that the law enforcement on the ground know. And the law enforcement on the ground cannot use their resources the best they can unless you let them.
Yeah.
Coming Storm addressed that too. Yeah. And the biggest thing that I took away from, because you're right, we hear it and we go immediately to whatever our source is. Or call
someone and did you hear?
You text, you get on the television. And one of the things that they pointed out is that the earliest accounts
are often inaccurate.
Are highly inaccurate.
And I will tell you this, the script for The Coming Storm, the director and I wrote.
Oh, no kidding.
There was a professional writer, of course, a professional writing team who put the initial script together, and then we put the language in.
Okay.
That was that kind of language, because often initial reports are often wrong.
Yes.
It's so true.
So Andy and I talked about it this morning, and I'm a little uncomfortable using the word advice because I hate that it's become so commonplace. But if somebody is in a situation where there's believed to be an active shooter, what advice do you give? Do they run? Do they shelter in place? What do you suggest we do?
It is good advice. It's good training. Security and safety isn't about, if it happens. It's about when it happens, do you know what to do? That's what we want. That's what safety is.
Okay.
Why do your kids take fire drills?
Yeah.
Right? We've had those kind of conversations before. It's not because they're having fires in the schools, because if they did have, you want them to know.
Yep.
And they take that knowledge home too, and they know, oh yeah, this is what you do. Building is burning, get out. Active shooter is it's a shooting in your school, which is incredibly rare. A shooting in a school is incredibly rare in the United States, but gets outsized coverage on the media, which I understand why, because it's emotions and kids and all of that. But if it did occur, whether it's in your school, in your movie theater, in your park, or whatever, the absolute answer is you run if you can. Run if you're in threat of danger. And sometimes schools especially will say, oh, we need to lock these kids down. That's great. That's the hide part. There's nothing in conflict between run, hide, fight and lockdown. Okay. And out west, they use lockdown, lockout. They have some different language. It all means the same thing. It means you either move away from the danger, you huddle away and get yourself someplace where the danger can't get to you.
Thank you to Southern Michigan Bank and Trust. Ready for better banking? Switch today.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Barker Weber Insurance Agency, Partners Bulk Logistics, and Printer Source Plus. Thank you to our regional partners serving Michigan, Ohio, and beyond.
In San Ysidro, California, there was this shooting at this McDonald's, and it was a terrible situation, and people hid underneath the plastic desks. You're not protected. Mm-hmm. Katherine, the most seriously injured survivor of the Virginia Tech shooting, Christina Anderson, is an acquaintance, a friend of mine, and Christina told me once she was shot 3 times, and she ducked under her desk. The shooter came back into her school classroom at the university 3 times, and the second time, she said, when he came in, she said she was underneath those plastic desks that have little metal spindly. There's no hiding. She got down on the floor like everybody does and ducks down, and she said, I turned my face away so he wouldn't see me, which is how your brain works.
Wow.
So if you train yourself in your natural instinct is to run from danger, you just run. Everybody who runs from danger, the children who survived the Sandy Hook shooting from the classroom where a lot of kids were murdered, fled the classroom. They were taught to flee the classroom. Now the kids at the other end of the hallway, most shootings, whether they're schools or not, most shootings like that end in 5 minutes or less, 70% of them. And half of those in 2 minutes or less.
Wow.
So you only need to be safe for that amount of time generally. It's very rare that we have one that extends longer. So part of the reason that it's valuable to know run, hide, fight is if you are in immediate danger, get out of there.
Yeah.
Just get out of there. Don't think about where I should run. Should I zigzag across the lawn? No is the answer to that. The bigger distance you are from the bullet trajectory, the safer you're going to be. And I know plenty of people who have run and have survived to tell the tale.
We have, when we see these stories about these mass killers, these individuals, you hear a lot about where were the parents? What about mental health? Someone had to know. You and I have chatted before, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the killer will tell an average of 4 people what they're going to do before they do it. And that to me is just shocking.
Yeah, what the type of shootings that we're talking about, and yeah, I'm sorry for all you guys who are listening to this and thinking, oh my God, what a losing topic. But I think we work with a lot of bad information, and I think it's helpful to have the accurate information. Largest research ever done on these types of shooters was done by the FBI's behavioral teams, and what people call it the profilers, right? Mm-hmm. And we found that in shootings that actually occurred, where we could get a lot of data, every single shooter on this traveled kind of on this trajectory of targeted violence that included planning and preparing. Mm-hmm. And planning and preparing is like, the preparing part is like buying their cool clothes so that they can have their picture taken with cool clothes on, and cutting their hair the right way, and buying the cool camouflage jacket or whatever they think they need to look right, but also buying ammunition, bulletproof vests, more ammunition than they would ever need. Yeah, bulletproof vests sometimes, helmets, guns, stuff that they normally, even if they are gun owners,
someone sold it to them.
They buy other stuff, right? So they want to be cool, and they want to be this different person that they aren't. So they invent that. That's physical. People will see those changes. But in addition to that, almost every one of them leaks. Sorry about that. Almost every one of them leaks an intention to do so. We call that leakage. They'll say, I'm done with this. We're not going to have this anymore. I tried. Those guys, they were supposed to take care of this. That's what we see with like the CEO shooter at the hospital. Anger, over. I tried to ask people to help me, and they wouldn't. And it's not. A lot of times people say, well, these people just have mental health problems. Well, you absolutely have some sort of mental health problem where you're degrading if you get to the point where you think the only solution is to pull out a gun and shoot a bunch of people, right? Yeah, there's no question about that. But it's the other things that happen before that where people are getting more and more frustrated, whether it's, somebody who can't handle their bankruptcy, their spouse, leaves them, their boyfriend leaves them, their girlfriend leaves them, and they begin to become brittle, and they begin to say things. And how we call those behaviors of concern. Okay. Atypical behaviors, the behaviors that are not yours. If you fire once a week, you go and shoot trap and skeet, and you suddenly start firing, 3, 4, 5 times a week in your backyard, atypical behavior, right? If you are doing your job every day and then all of a sudden you stop coming to work, or your work progress, the shooter at the Oakland County, in the Oakland County shooting at Oxford High School, stopped turning in work 2 weeks before. He didn't do any work. I think that was Oakland. Could have been Barkland. I think it was Oakland.
Oakland County, Oxford. Yeah, Oxford High School in Oakland County. It's just amazing.
So the cues are there, but it's hard sometimes for us to watch and see them. And when people say, well, where were the parents? Certainly the parents here in the Detroit area were convicted, right? And they're in jail for that. But, it's not just the parents. And I think that's what I want to tell you. We had a person on our podcast. I do a podcast called Stop the Killing. And we had assistant principal of a middle school on. And she told us this incredible story about a shooting that was stopped at her school because she said, I make my team listen to your podcast. And they knew what to do.
That's so cool.
Wow.
When they got the information.
Yeah.
This was last season, and I was going to stop doing the podcast because it's so much work, and I've got so much work already, and you don't get paid for it. You're just doing it for free because you think you should, and you got nothing else to do with all your free time.
You have free time. Well, you're on season 5 now of Stop the Killing podcast, it has been successful. Tell us a little bit about the podcast.
Well, I think it has been because of this. She calls us and she sends us a note and says, "I want you to know I make my team listen to your podcast, and we heard this information, and because we heard this information, we stopped a shooting at our school."
That's amazing.
You saved lives with your podcast.
I mean, that's what she says, but she saved the lives. They did, but because they were astute enough, they listened.
Yeah.
And what happened is, but when we talk about, well, where were the parents? Let me tell you, 92%, the FBI's research tells us that 92% of the school shooters told another person in their school. Or one or more people in their school that they were going to do this. 92%. That means everyone. This assistant principal who called us said that she had a young lady who overheard a boy talking to some other boys. I think they were 6th graders. And I think there were, 4 at the table in the lunchroom or something like that, or 3 people. And talking about how he was going to come and shoot up the school. And as it turned out that this boy had been talking about this and was planning it for 2 years. And the kids no one ever told anybody. Okay, that kid probably would, I'll tell you, elementary school or middle school shooters usually end up dead.
Wow.
They kill themselves.
Yeah.
They kill themselves, and some high school shooters do too, right?
Yeah.
But middle school shooters, they shoot up their own school. High school shooters shoot up their own schools. So telling is not... It's not snitching.
Right.
Telling is saving lives.
Yeah.
Telling is getting somebody help. Snitching is getting somebody in trouble.
Yeah, you wonder how many of those kids at that table told their parents or didn't tell their parents.
None, I think. But we've heard from many people who've had situations like that. So I know it's working, I know it's happening, but I think it's an awareness and a willingness to get involved, because it's not just see something and say something. Right, you got to do the say something part.
So if you were advising a high school administrator that said, hey, this kid, decent kid, quiet, usually stays out of trouble, but we found this weird drawing and threat, what would you advise them to do next?
Schools today should have threat assessment teams who can do that analysis, so that they have input from law enforcement, they have input from school counselors and coaches and teachers. And also parents, need to get involved. You can't, the biggest mistake I think I see when it comes to schools and threats to schools is a disengagement from parents where they don't realize that their kids their kid's making a threat.
Okay.
So the kids sometimes, they make a lot of false threats. Every time something happens, law enforcement wastes so much time and effort of your tax dollars chasing down non-existent threats. But when the parents see something, their answer is understandably protective. Oh, my kid wouldn't, he's just talking. He will never do that. That's what every shooter says.
Sure.
Every shooter says, and every person that I've ever interviewed after a crime, I'm telling you, as a prosecutor and as an FBI agent, every family member and close friend tells me, he's just not really that kind of guy. I didn't think he would do it.
Wow.
He just jokes around a lot. Yeah, okay. Let the professionals decide, because you know what? Law enforcement can't arrest somebody particularly a minor, right? They can't arrest a minor because somebody calls in and says, this kid seems weird and he's doing this.
Yeah.
That's not a crime. So no one's going to get arrested.
Yeah.
Snitching is getting somebody in trouble. Telling is getting somebody help. And if a
No, I
parent,
like that.
if a parent doesn't know what to do, why not engage with the people who know better?
So the name of our podcast is the Monday Mornings Podcast, and when we started this, it was with the idea that we'd like to find out what gets our guests up and out of bed on Monday mornings. You got a Monday morning coming up. What gets you out of bed every Monday morning to continue this work that you're so passionate about and successful with? I want to talk about your books here in a minute, but what does get you out of bed every Monday morning?
What gets me out of bed every Monday morning is the fact, with regard to this particular subject, and the fact that I have two beautiful girls who are all grown up, what gets me out of bed every Monday morning is knowing that proportionately the largest number of school shootings happen on Mondays.
Amazing.
Mondays.
That's
Wow.
amazing.
So we have to do our jobs
Yep.
Thursdays and Fridays, and not say on Friday, he's just tired.
Yes.
And that's why he said that. And it's not just school shootings. It's all shootings like that. You know,
Okay.
when somebody comes home from work and they're frustrated and mad,
And they take
and we say, "Oh, he'll be fine over the weekend." You can't say he'll be fine.
yeah.
She'll get over it over the weekend, because the largest number of school shootings happen on Mondays, and there's a reason for it.
At the very beginning of this, you mentioned that mass shootings, school shootings, are actually very rare. They're just
Super.
extremely publicized. And one of the things that really stood out to me in looking at some of your research and things you've done is the way you've analyzed Americans' relationship with guns over the last 200 years, specifically the last 100 years, and how that's changed. So you're not necessarily anti-gun, but you are very proactive in stopping these ridiculous nonsense killings. Can you tell us a little bit about what you've studied?
Absolutely. So for one thing, when you say, so you're not necessarily anti-gun, all those words I don't really like.
Okay.
No offense. But I get asked all the time, are you gun or anti-gun?
Sure.
And I'm like, I'm an FBI agent. I carry a gun. What are
Sure.
you talking about? And I always say, like, I'm anti-killing. I mean,
Right.
I'm good with that. And I think everybody who carries a gun
Yes.
is anti-killing, and everybody who doesn't is anti-killing.
Yes.
Right? So I think we're all on the same page, looking for the same thing. But I understand what you're kind of trying to get to. I think in part, if I can just pretend that I could take back that sass. I think that your point is really like, you don't have any issue with guns, so how do you get through the fog of the discussion about guns? And guns are part of it. And when people say guns are not the problem, I say guns clearly are. They're
Right.
part of the problem, because just like bullets are part of the problem, and just like people's mental degradation is part of the problem, that is, that they don't have this, or, I mean, people say, so I'll tell you this. So my second book was called How to Talk About Guns with Anyone, which I'm actually going to rebrand. And then we're going to call it An Easy Guide to the Second Amendment.
Oh.
Because I teach a Second Amendment class at DePaul University. This is what I teach at DePaul University in Chicago, is a class on the Second Amendment and how it's changed over time, and how we feel about it. Because it is a social issue for us. I did this TEDx talk in Tulsa earlier in the last year, and after I finished, and it was all about, what are we going to do with the gun situation that we have now, and how do we feel about it? And this big, tall, just what you would expect in Tulsa, tall, lanky guy with a cowboy hat came shuffling up next to me afterwards, and he's like, it's pretty brave of you, young lady, to come to Oklahoma and talk about guns. And and I said, well, where else should I talk about guns? I mean, I can't go into everybody gets guns in different ways in San Francisco or New York, but I think a lot of times in the rest of the world, in our country, we don't. Most frequent thing that I hear with gun owners is, all the time I hear this: I'm a responsible gun owner. I don't see what the issue is. It's not the guns. I get that logic,
Sure.
but we are the country that has this problem where we have now, since Sandy Hook, we have twice as many guns as we had in the country when the Sandy Hook shooting occurred. in 2013, to December 2012. And we have more guns than people. We have 400 million plus guns in the United States, 300 million plus people. So there's huge gun availability, and that requires us to think about how we handle those guns, what we do with them, who can get them, when they can get them. Because of course, the vast majority, 90-some% of the people probably who own those guns are responsible gun owners. But when we talk about what is responsible, some people will say responsible is that you don't shoot people, and other people will say responsible is that you keep your gun in the safe and you keep your ammunition in another safe. So what we mean by responsible gun owner is the discussion that we still have to keep having.
And I want to mention on your podcast, you don't talk politics. It's not. This isn't a political discussion that you want to have.
No, there isn't. I mean, killing is not a political
Absolutely.
issue. We're all against killing. We're all good with that. And on the podcast, we talk to people who are they handle victims and services. We talk to victims of shootings, people who've lost their kids, people who are, but all in an empowering way. The whole podcast is based on you can learn to not be afraid if you have information and you're empowered. And so we talk about shootings, but we don't talk about shooters. We talk about what should you look for when when your kid gets to be this age. I mean, sometimes people say, well, for example, all these shooters I hear everybody who speaks in facts, and they're all like, oh, all the shooters are this or all the shooters that. No, the research doesn't tell us that. Let's stick to the facts. If you think that every shooter is an 18-year-old or a 17-year-old white boy living in his mom's basement playing video games, my comment to you would be the potential shooter in that household is his dad upstairs, who's stressed at work and is trying to manage his finances and is taking care of his elderly parents, or didn't get the raise that he wanted or did get it, because the average age of our shooters is in their 30s. That's the age of our average shooter. It is male. That's the only demographic, male.
I want you to ask that question that you had about the ever able to relax at dinner.
Well, I
like
just
say
wondered,
we're out at
like,
dinner. Say the three of us are out at dinner.
Yeah,
Are
if
you
we go
gonna
out to dinner and are you able to just enjoy and have great conversation, or are you scanning the room, kind of taking in like potential threats?
Am I protecting you from?
Yes.
protecting the table?
I think any law enforcement officer would tell you they're always watching.
Yeah.
They're always watching. You do watch, and you see so much more that other people don't see.
Sure.
Because you're trained to do that for years. But also I see somebody who comes in the door who looks a little hinky for some reason. I think that's the official word for it.
Hinky.
I'm going to start using that.
No, that's the word. They look a little hinky, and then you would just watch them for a while and you see, right? And or they come into an elevator. You get into an elevator together, you're walking down the street, you address them, you talk to them, because you want to assess them real quick.
Okay.
So we're better, I think, and we're better trained to assess people. So you can't live under stress all the time. I know people who say, I can never go out for dinner anymore because I'm always worried some shooter's going to come in.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's so sad because no, the numbers don't anywhere get near there. Go out to dinner and have a great time.
Right. Go
to your kid's school event. Don't buy your kid a bulletproof backpack that weighs 25 pounds when they weigh 35 pounds or 45 pounds. They don't overly think anything. So that's what I try to do. I will say that I've certainly sat at many a movie with my handgun in my lap and some other stuff, especially when I was first working it, when we were seeing shootings in different ways. And the shootings have changed, I think. They've evolved. And it just made me feel better.
Yeah.
Nothing like sitting in church with your hand in your handgun, your hand in your purse.
And
with
again,
a handgun.
you're those are scenes for you in previous cases. A church, a school. I mean, absolutely.
That's true. And and also I feel, some people used to say to me, and I think about this: if you're not a gun owner and you don't understand why somebody carries a gun, think of it from this perspective. I'm as you would guess, highly trained. Thank you for your tax dollars. Highly trained in the use of weapons, and so I'm pretty good at it compared to most of the people that are probably in this building right now, right? If I'm out with my kids, people would say, why would you carry a gun when you're out with your kids? Because what if they get hurt? Why wouldn't you what if that gun goes off? I'm like, no, I'm with the most important thing in my life,
Who
my
you want to
kids.
protect the most.
So, and I'm highly trained to protect them.
Right.
But I will say, from this civilian aspect of good guy with a gun, no data supports good guy with a gun.
Okay.
No data supports it. So don't buy a gun when you don't know how to handle it and think you're going to train and learn how to do it, because that's the only way you can protect yourself.
Yep.
The safest thing for you to do is to get out of the way. Right?
Yeah.
And I will tell you, of the research, the initial research that the FBI did, that I was a co-author on, of the 160 shootings that we studied, 21 of them were successfully stopped by an unarmed civilian. Unarmed. Safely and successfully stopped by an unarmed civilian. 21 of the 160 incidents, none stopped by a civilian with a handgun.
Interesting. Again, a lot in the media or in entertainment, and we've talked about having, is it bad that kids have 24-hour access to true crime shows and things
True
like
crime.
that?
People love true
People
crime,
love it.
man.
Women love true crime.
I do want to ask you, what do you think?
Is there any data to support that more women enjoy true crime than men?
Oh, yeah. Actually, there is. You're talking to somebody who's been to CrimeCon in London and in the United States.
Yeah.
So CrimeCon is like it's like Comic-Con, only it's for crime.
What's
it's
your-
for crime law.
Stop.
No, I'm going to London in June
Oh my
Can you
God.
believe that?
to go to CrimeCon.
What's your biggest number one all-time case, either that you've worked on or that you've studied?
Case like what? Like 9/11 was pretty big. No, what do you mean? You mean like a shooting?
Yeah, like a shooting.
I don't know. They're all bad. I mean, they're all bad, and I worked on so many. And
Are there any
I
that
mean,
still
I think biggest is not
just-
the. I didn't mean biggest.
Or
Maybe
still haunt you
Maybe
or
something that
stays with you?
Yeah, something that stays with you. Something that just doesn't sit well with you.
yeah, actually, there was a junior high kid I wrote about in my first book. My first book is the same name as the podcast, Stop the Killing, and I wrote about this junior high kid who wanted to take a gun to school, and he wanted to take his paintball gun to school, and his mom said no, and she took him to school, and she saw the edge of the paintball gun in his backpack, and she said, "I told you can't take that to school." So she took it out of his backpack, and what she didn't know is that he had taken the handgun that was in the cereal cupboard at their house, and he got out of the car, and he took that handgun out and walked around the back of school and shot an employee right away. And yeah, I mean, there's more to the story.
Sure.
But it was just, good family, good parents, responsible, nice neighborhood, just where all these shootings occur. Suburban, wonderful neighborhoods where every single person you talk to says, it's never going to happen here. It can't happen here.
How big is the blowback in these communities? What did the communities ever recover?
Not in the same way. I think it takes a long time, but I think, you think about when a shooting happens at a school like Sandy Hook, very often they'll tear the school down.
Sure.
The Parkland shooting it was a few years ago, and they're just tearing the school down.
Oxford, I've been in. It looks nothing the same.
Right.
No.
So it changes the temperature of the whole community, but so many people are impacted by it, and I think that there's also, it's such a steep learning curve. You never had a shooting like that in your school district or in your neighborhood or your town, so you know nothing about it. You don't do any research, and all you know is what you hear on the hysterical news, right? Then it happens in your town, and you have to suck it up and figure out how to handle victim services and how to handle mental health care for unending amounts of people. Like one of the things in the Oxford High School shooting that I'm really proud of Oxford, the Oakland County Prosecutor's Office, charging the subject with terrorism, state terrorism charges, because the terrorism charges were in a recognition, and this had never happened in the United States, a recognition that the other students and adults in the school were terrorized. I love that.
And do you feel like that case, the precedents that they set between that, calling it terrorism, the parents actually being held accountable for their minor child's actions. Do you see that as setting a positive precedence moving forward, where maybe people are paying a little bit closer attention to what their kids are doing? And
I hope so. I think the only one that's going to learn that lesson is the parents, because and the parents who talk to their kids and so, because truthfully, their evidence is not going to come together as a prosecutor like that case did.
Yeah.
Where you had the parents in the school the day of the shooting.
Yeah.
And knew that they owned a gun, bought a gun for a minor, purposely. So those kinds of facts, they're not going to come together. I hear all the time, where were the parents? Where were the parents? Where were the parents?
Sure.
Parents, as a parent, a single mom of 2 kids, raising 2 kids, I wasn't the one who was always with my kids. And we can't always count on that. We really have to count on the fact that everybody keeps their eyes and ears open, not just for shootings, but for everything else. For mental health issues, for safety, for kids who want to commit suicide because they don't know they're gonna end up in a suicide situation.
Yeah, the community has to look out for each other, no doubt.
Well, it's only to the community's advantage.
In addition to serving through the Federal Bureau of Investigation and all the different ways that you've really served the community at large,
Thank you.
You have written books to help educate us dum-dums.
No, don't say that.
We are very dumb.
Well,
Don't say that.
well, I would say dumb's not the right word, but uneducated
Yeah.
with regards to what you see all day, every day. And you've kind of made it your mission to educate and hope to stop the killings. So
Big
can we
award,
talk a
too,
little
by the way. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Very well.
Yes.
How can we find the books, and then tell us a little bit about them? Yeah.
Well, if you can spell my name, you can find the books, right? Because you can find them on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and Ingram Sparks and any place where they sell books. But you can also find them on my website at katherineschweit.com.
Okay.
And I wrote the first book, Stop the Killing, How to End the Mass Shooting Crisis, simply because I wanted to explain all the stuff that you're hearing in a more cohesive way than me just babbling. And so it really looks at how can we prevent it?
Okay.
What are you looking for if you find something? Who do you tell? And also because I heard so much blowback from parents and the Department of Education about, we can't teach kids this, we can't talk to kids about this. You can. And you know what?
should.
And there are people who are doing it.
It's invaluable having you, someone who's lived it, studied it, covered it, prosecuted all of this, and willing to share your expertise and share your time and what you have.
But you know what? Truthfully, though, I wrote this book because I wanted to stop talking about it. I want everybody else to know the stuff that's in my head, and so that I can go on and do other things. And I really wrote the other book, which I call the gun book. I really wrote the other book because there's so much confusion over what the gun laws are. I hear people, I try all the things that people say, like, we should do what Australia did. Okay, that just tells me you don't know what Australia did. We should do this, we should do that, we should repeal the Second Amendment. Yeah, that's great, because who's going to run around when you repeal it, which is almost impossible to do, because you have to get ratification from 50 states within a short amount of time.
Just run around and grab 400
and then
million
you're going to
weapons.
run around, and what are you going to do, buy them back? What's the plan there? Who's thought this? Let's think some of the plans out. And that's really why I wrote the second book, to just address the issue, particularly about guns in America, so that we put some facts on the table. I'm like you said before, I'm not about politics at all. Politics doesn't even come into play. It isn't a political issue. It's a facts. Let's figure out what the facts are. And then we decide as a country, we decide as a people what we want to do. Some states want to have red flag laws. Some don't. Some want to have yellow flag laws. One. Others, the other 49 don't, right? But states want to have threat assessment teams that are mandatory for all schools. That's great. So whatever those different things are, let's know the facts about them instead. And that's why I wrote the books. And that's really and the podcast really came about, because my now friend, Sarah Ferris, who lives in London, called and harassed me until I agreed to do a podcast with her. And she'd be the first one to admit that. So it's actually, though, it's a great podcast in terms of, so many people listen to it and then they refer back. And I have friends who work in, commercial industries, and they'll buy 200 books and hand it out to 200 school district chiefs or 200 security chiefs. And I'm not making any money on the books. Actually, I haven't made the money that I spent to print them.
Oh, wow.
But I'm happy that they're out there.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you for flying in today. Like Jennifer said, Wolf Blitzer to our little podcast closet. We appreciate it.
No, my gosh, don't say that.
You'll have to come back, too.
I will come back. I will absolutely come back.
To promote, you have a third book coming out
Yeah, that's
I
right.
do. I'm
that you're
very
working on
excited
now.
about it. It's a true crime.
This one I hope you make a lot of money on.
Oh, that would be nice.
Yeah.
I would just like to make what I spent. You know,
Yeah.
There you go.
that would be the big part. If I could make what I spent, even not even sucking away the time, just the actual dollars that I spent. But yeah, I do have a new book coming out. I'm hoping to have it out at the first of the year. I haven't actually. I'll tell you what the title is. Don't tell. Don't tell anyone.
Okay.
I think it's gonna. I'm hoping it's gonna come out maybe. I'm hoping it's gonna come out maybe February.
Okay.
Okay.
Right. So that's my goal. That's my goal. It's called Women Who Talk to the Dead.
Oh.
And it's about women who talk to the dead. Yeah, exactly. So it's actually about this extraordinary group of people in Detroit and in law enforcement and in Michigan. So this is a book about Michigan. I really wanted to do. And it's spearheaded by a Detroit officer who was working missing person cases. And then she realized that a lot of times she had a missing person who she had no, she couldn't find that person, but then she also found in their police files that she had all these unsolved murders. And one of the reasons that some of them, hundreds of them, a couple hundred of them were unsolved is because the people were not identified.
Oh.
They were buried without a name.
Amazing.
Oh,
And she said, she called a friend of mine from the FBI who runs the Detroit FBI forensics team and said, let's dig them up and get their DNA.
wow.
So Women Who Talk to the Dead.
I can't wait to read
Oh,
that. I
that's
can't
gonna
wait
be
till it comes
amazing.
out. Good luck. Thank you so much. And we're looking forward to our next conversation. Katherine Schweit.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This was really a treat.
It was fun. Thank you
you.
so much. SMBT, new branch open at the corner of Horton and Weatherwax in Jackson.
Mind blown.
She's coming back.
Oh, this needs to be like a 2-parter, if not 3 or 4-parter.
It's amazing to be able to hear right from the FBI.
Yes.
And, when something, a big incident happens, you see all this stuff all over the news, misinformation. I feel like after talking with Katherine a little bit, you get a better understanding of what's going on at the
Yes.
scene.
Yeah, we always want a nugget, right? And I
Yep.
think we had several that we took away from that amazing conversation. And she gifted us some books, Stop the Killing, How to End the Mass Shooting Crisis. And then her next one was How to Talk About Guns with Anyone. This, I think, is incredible. I started
sure.
it last night. And gosh, I feel wiser already. So we are actually going to gift some of these to some of our lucky listeners. So tell them how they can win these.
Yeah,
books.
all you have to do is subscribe to the Monday Mornings podcast on YouTube and subscribe to Stop the Killing podcast. That's Katherine's podcast. And we will select a few winners and you'll get a autographed book from Katherine. So.
Award-winning.
Award-winning, yes. So very cool. Look her up, KatherineSchweit.com. And thank you guys so much. Thanks to SMBT. Again, one more time, let me thank Barker Weber Insurance Agency, Partners Bulk Logistic, and Printer Source Plus. Jennifer, that was awesome. Looking forward to the next one.
Thank you, Andy.